we'll get started. I'll give a little brief introduction of Jim. I think most of you that have been with CureJM for a while know Jim Minow, our executive director. He's been with CureJM since what, 2015, Jim?
Yeah. I'm just about going into my 8th year.
8 years, wow.
Yeah.
And he was involved with nonprofits in a variety of roles for more than 30 years. So he has a lot of experience interacting with research folks, with physicians, and a variety of fields to get better treatments for whatever program. And he's done a great job for CureJM, spearheading our annual giving programs, events, major gifts, a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, which most of us don't see, but really appreciate. So he's looking forward to certainly strengthening our treatments of JM, and hopefully at sometime in the future have a cure. And Jim is here today to give us a brief overview of CureJM, and don't know all of what he's talking about, but I assume some of it will be what's going on currently with high-level things with research and I think, Jim, why don't you go ahead? We're at 5 after, and if other folks join in, we'll. Before you start, all the grandparents online. We know most of us know each other, but there are a few new ones that we don't know. And so at the end of Jim's talk, he'll have a question and answer period for issues with questions about whatever he's talking about. And then after that, we'll have some general introductions, so we hopefully can get to know each other a little better. So, Jim,
Great.
All yours.
All right. Well, Randy, thank you very much. Much appreciated. And I'm definitely, without question, looking forward to everything that we'll be talking about today. As Randy said, I'm Jim Minow, the Executive Director of the CureJM Foundation. I've been with the foundation now almost 8 years, and really, cannot say enough about what this organization has accomplished in our 20-year history. And in fact, we are coming up in 2023 to our 20th anniversary. It's going to be a milestone year for us, and really just couldn't be more impressed with what this organization has accomplished. For the vast majority of the hundreds of thousands of nonprofits in the United States, never make it to 10 years, let alone 20 years. So the fact that we have not only survived but thrived, it really says a lot about just how important this organization has been to families, because it's really been all of our families and frankly all of our grandparents who have given us the wherewithal to accomplish what this organization has done in its first 20 years. I really can't understate the importance that all of you have had and hundreds of other grandparents have had in the creation of and the development of this organization over the years. CureJM is in a very, very strong position right now. We're financially healthy. We have survived and even prospered through the COVID pandemic over the past 3 years. We've pivoted when necessary. We've been able to maintain, with only a very few delays, the progress of our research. I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. And in fact, we've expanded our footprint during the period of time over this past 3 years that COVID has impacted all of our lives and our JM children's lives as well. We're really looking, as we look to 2023 and beyond, what I can think of as, in a sense, 5 key objectives in terms of looking forward to our next, 1, 2, 3, 5-year cycle. And the first is, and there's no particular order of importance of these, they're all important, but the first is to build something new for CureJM called our Clinical Care Network. And our Clinical Care Network has been created primarily because, and I'm going to use a quote here, because the best doctors for juvenile dermatomyositis don't just happen. They have to be engaged, they have to be trained, they have to come together in conferences. They need a large umbrella under which they can share and grow and develop their own expertise. And CureJM provides that to them through this newly developed organization, which is really just in a way, kind of a formalization of what we've always had, called the Clinical Care Network. And this network exists to, to really assure that JM children receive the absolute best care that they can anywhere in the country. And why is this important? It's important because not all of our families, have the ability to travel to locations where you might think the best JM experts might reside, whether that's in New York or Washington, D.C. or Chicago. And so it's important to us and important to our families that high level of expertise exists in all communities and all corners of the country. And so we've started by creating and essentially enrolling 12 new children's hospitals in the Clinical Care Network that join our 5 centers of excellence as essentially the centers of high quality clinical and medical access to JM children. These hospitals range anywhere from Southern California through Texas up into the Pacific Northwest, across to the Northeast, down into Georgia and the South. So we've got a pretty strong footprint across the United States, and our goal over the next several years is to perhaps double that number. It was a relatively, I don't want to say easy, but we know from essentially the results of our last 20 years of work, we have a great amount of confidence in these first 12 members of the Clinical Care Network. And now we want to look at areas of the country that are also deserving of having a JM expert, but where a little more training and expertise is perhaps in order before we can kind of take that to the next level. The next component that's quite important is the development of our chapters, and within our chapters, I include our Grandparents Network, what really all of you are doing with the Grandparent Council. Prior to COVID, we had 19 active chapters around the country that were driving the success of CureJM. Parents primarily driving those chapters, some grandparents involved in those chapters. But of course, the one thing we all know happened as a result of the pandemic is almost everybody had to stop meeting in person. Everybody was isolating, they were taking care in their own homes, and the ability to meet and interact, which is very important to our families in the communities where we had these 19 chapters, really couldn't happen during the pandemic with very good reason that we're all aware of. So we're starting now to redevelop those chapters, and because they've been dormant for the better part of 3 years, it's almost like we're starting over. So we have 15 good candidates for relaunching our chapters. I believe in the next 10 in the next year through 2023. We'll have probably 10 of them up and running again, and then as we move into 2024, we'll have another 5 or 8 until we get back to the 19 or 20 chapters that we had back in 2019. Very important, because those chapters are also, in a sense, the conduit that many of our families have to the medical experts that I was talking about before. The relationship between our chapters and the children's hospitals that serve the families in those chapters is a very important symbiotic relationship that we're very eager to rebuild. The fourth focus, which has been really, I think, my emphasis for really all of the years that I've been here at Cure JM, is better drugs and better drugs that lead to earlier remission for children with JM. I don't need to tell all of you the terrible side effects that exist with what is essentially the primary medical protocol for the treatment of JM, which is typically steroids and methotrexate in basically various dosage regimens, kind of a trial and error approach almost, then often followed by IVIG, and then either modified steroids or some other off-label drugs for maintenance, in the hope that a child will move into remission after some number of years. The good thing about that, and it's hard to say that there's a good thing about that, but prior to the discovery that prednisone and methotrexate in combination would effectively suppress the immune system, children were much sicker from JDM than they are today, and in fact the mortality rate, which is pretty close to zero today, was about 30 or 33% back prior to 1960, when many of these current treatments were essentially accidentally discovered that could suppress one's immune system. And we've been living with that ever since. But today we've got I think some extraordinary momentum that started maybe 4 or 5 years ago, with a handful of drugs that show some promise for use in juvenile dermatomyositis, and indeed at a very small scale. Some of them are used for juvenile dermatomyositis today. The two that I think we will see come online most quickly, one will be, I believe, as early as next year, is a drug called excuse me, I'm about to mispronounce it, adabacept, which is an existing drug for rheumatoid arthritis. It has been through a 3-year clinical trial at our Center of Excellence at George Washington University, here in the Washington, D.C. area where I'm located. The trial has been completed. The preliminary results of the trial are very good. 90% of the children enrolled in the trial showed improvement in both muscle strength and skin scores as a result of taking adabacept. And the paper that will be published in a leading medical journal probably in December, that's what we're hoping, should lead to more general acceptance of this drug as a mainline treatment for juvenile dermatomyositis. A second drug is called baricitinib. It's a drug that's manufactured by the pharmaceutical company Lilly. It has also been through at least 2, maybe 3, but 2 that I know of, clinical trials, one in juvenile myositis and another in adult myositis. And baricitinib has also shown promise to suppress the immune system and in fact interrupt one of the pathways that we believe is responsible for inflammation that essentially causes loss of muscle strength and skin conditions from juvenile myositis. Both of those trials showed significant clinical improvement in the majority of the patients who were enrolled in those trials. Now, the juvenile myositis trial was very small, 4 patients. And so a second juvenile myositis trial will be enrolling either late this year or early in 2023. It's a larger number of patients in the cohort, about 20 juvenile patients. And you can look at this almost as being a confirmatory trial. And in other words, can we repeat the results that we saw in the first trial in a larger, broader cohort of patients and gather more data that will be useful for physicians who may choose to use baricitinib in the future when this second trial is complete. We can probably anticipate that this trial will take a couple of years, but I can also anticipate that if the results are positive and the signs seem to point in that direction, that we would have another drug that would be available for essentially the first order of treatment in juvenile dermatomyositis, and could result in significantly less reliance and possibly even no reliance on steroids. So that's a big objective that we have, because essentially it's in our mission, to find better treatments and a cure for juvenile dermatomyositis. This is the way that will be accomplished. And the fourth major area that is that you've probably seen some information, certainly on our new website. I hope you've all visited our new website. If you haven't, please do at curejm.org. Is a mental health initiative that essentially has kind of 2 prongs to the initiative. The first prong is to provide resources to parents and to teen patients and older patients in the mental health arena who suffer from anxiety or depression, most typically as a result of having juvenile myositis. Perhaps some of you have seen levels of anxiety and depression in your grandchildren. We know that the levels of anxiety and depression in children who have rare diseases are 3, 4, 5 times higher than in the general population, and it is something that has, I think, historically been overlooked by the medical profession in terms of patient care. I think especially among children who have to cope with a lot of the problems and the side effects and essentially the issues that come around living with a disease like juvenile myositis. And so the first prong of this program is to provide support to those patients who want that kind of support. And so we have a peer mentor program, for example. And the peer mentor program is one that matches older kids with younger teens, but kids who aren't so old to kind of be, out of the realm of youthfulness, if you will. So in order to be a mentor, you have to be 18 or older, and in order to be a mentee, in other words, a child who could benefit from having a mentor and a group to talk about these issues with, has to be 12 years of age or older. And so what we've seen in this particular program is a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of support from parents who who are beginning to see that that their child is indeed perhaps, if not certainly, benefiting from having other interaction with other kids on or about their age who are dealing with these same issues. The second prong of this program really looks more at raising awareness of and providing training to clinicians who take care of JM kids. And so, with that in mind, we have a clinician training program that we're doing with several other institutions as co-sponsors, most notably the Children's Hospital of Colorado and Sick Kids out of Toronto. We're enrolling patients who will, attend essentially 2 seminars that are where they're also eligible to receive continuing education credits. And the idea is number one, to raise awareness, and number two, to provide some skills to these clinicians on how to handle and begin the process of building mental health components into their clinical protocols and standards of care. And finally, engaging other parts of their children's hospitals, most notably the behavioral health aspects of the children's hospital, to engage with them so they can take advantage of the expertise that already exists within those hospitals, but may not be applied in pediatric rheumatology and juvenile myositis. So that's another major initiative that we are developing as we're moving into 2023. And I couldn't be more pleased with the rapid progress that has made under the consultant that we have, a former board member, Suzanne Edison, who has been extraordinary in her commitment to this program and to engaging clinicians and families around the country. So if you have any questions about that program or want to know more about it, you can reach Suzanne at Suzanne, SUZANNE .edison@curejm.org. The heart of our program over our 20 years of existence has been the funding that we have provided to our centers of excellence, who all of those centers of excellence conduct significant research, as well as to researchers around the country. And this year coming up in 2023 is no different than any other year in our past, other than it's larger and continues to expand as our revenues allow. As I've mentioned, our clinical care network already. I had not mentioned that the 5 institutions that are our centers of excellence, who are also a part of that network. We have 12 new members plus the 5 centers of excellence, that we've just renewed commitments to those centers of excellence over the next 2 years of almost $1.3 million. And these networks not only, these clinical centers of excellence have not only provided the clinical care leadership over the years, but they've also provided much of the research leadership over the years, and we're very pleased that we've been able to move from having 2 centers of excellence some 4 or 5 years ago. Those 2 centers of excellence being at Chicago, at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, and as I mentioned, George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And over the last several years, we've added 3 more in Seattle at Seattle Children's Hospital, excuse me, it just went out of my head. Duke University in North Carolina was our next center of excellence, and most recently the University of California at San Francisco. So we now have 2 centers of excellence on the West Coast, 1 in the Midwest, and 2 on the East Coast. So again, we're increasing, access to the best and the brightest among clinical practitioners in the United States. We're also funding this year 10 other major research grants at institutions in the U.S. And around the world, principally in Canada and the United Kingdom. Although we have funded in the past in the Netherlands and Italy, in Europe, I think one grant in Germany some years ago. So we are also very much of an international organization. And in fact, we're the only organization that funds juvenile myositis research at anywhere near the level that exists around the country. It's hard to believe that a small organization like CureJM, that is a very grassrootsy organization, has had the enormous impact that we've had, because clinicians who want to pursue juvenile myositis research, by and large, with the exception of NIH, have almost no other place to turn. So these commitments for these 10 additional research grants that range anywhere from basic research to translational pre-drug development research, these commitments total another $1.7 million that are outstanding. And finally, right now we're looking at 8 new grant applications that have just been received during our August deadline, and these applications are really extremely exciting. They again range anywhere from a grant application for a study to bring non-invasive MRI imaging into essentially diagnosis, for both initial diagnosis as well as diagnosing improvements or lack thereof in muscle strength among JM kids. Very important because it's non-invasive, and it has it can provide ongoing data around improvement or deterioration of muscle fiber and muscle strength. We're very excited that this could be really a breakthrough in diagnosis. Another project really looking at targeting specific cell molecules that are implicated in juvenile myositis development. This is particularly important because it's a kind of a gene therapy. You've probably all heard of gene therapy, which up to this point we had thought was not a potential treatment for juvenile myositis, and this particular research project looks at a specific type of gene therapy that targets specific cell molecules, and if those molecules can be essentially transformed, or I think, if I'm remembering this grant application correctly, switched off is a way to look at it, that it could interrupt the JM cycle. So that these grants are all relatively significant grants of these 8, and they total new grant applications of just a little bit over $1 million. So I share all this with you because I think it very much underscores the breadth and depth of what this organization has accomplished over our 20-year history, and we don't have any intention of slowing down. In fact, we have every intention of speeding up. One of the things that we have around our 20th anniversary, as we launch that later this fall, is we would like to move beyond our current level of funding to something greater. That's a real challenge for a small organization like ours to kind of get to that next level. To share with you, a typical budget for CureJM is about $2.2 million a year. That's about the amount of money that we raise through Walk Strong Across America, through our holiday challenge, which is coming up this fall, and through local events that many of you have done or attended for us in the past, and our major gift program, which is basically those individuals who have the ability to make substantial gifts to us. That number has been relatively stable for the last several years. I think particularly given COVID, I feel pretty good about that. There were many nonprofit organizations that suffered significantly during the COVID crisis, and we were able to keep a pretty even keel as we moved through that. But we now need to go to the next level. These two clinical trials I was talking about for abatacept and baricitinib, are two of maybe 5 potential clinical trials we would have coming up anywhere in the next 2 to 5 years. And they're significantly more expensive than the basic research, which is fundamentally what we have funded for the most part in our 20-year history. So, moving forward, we have to become a bigger organization. We have to do more. We have to bring those chapters back, as I was talking about before. We have to continue to build our grandparent organization, under Randy's leadership and all of your participation. And as all of that happens, as we move into 2023 and 24, I've got great confidence that CureJM is limited only by limitations in our vision, not limitations in what we can accomplish as a really dedicated group of individuals around the country and indeed around the world. So I want to thank you for being a part of what we've accomplished in the past, for being a part of what we know we need to accomplish in the future. We can't do it without grandparents. We can't do it without parents being involved, and we can't do it without your direct participation in the holiday challenge coming up soon. So Walk Strong Across America, or anything else that you might think of as a way to provide leadership and engagement with CureJM. Want to thank you for that. And then finally, I'll just announce that another major event that CureJM has had to put on hold for the past 3 years has been our CureJM Family Conference. Many of you have attended the Family Conference in the past. I've met some of you at the Family Conference, and I'm very happy to announce that that Family Conference is back in 2023. Again, I know I sound like a broken record around the 20th anniversary, but it is our 20th anniversary annual conference. It will take place June 29th to July 2nd in Washington, D.C. At the Washingtonian Marriott, which is in a suburb of Washington, D.C., Bethesda, Maryland, Gaithersburg, Maryland, to just north of Bethesda, Maryland. But it's very close to the Washington, D.C. area. We'll be bringing in lots of JM and other research experts from the National Institutes of Health who have been longtime leaders in JM research. So it'll be an opportunity for you to meet many of the doctors and to interact with other grandparents and parents and families. We think it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of pent up demand after with COVID behind us with this conference, and we're looking forward to having the biggest and best conference ever. So wanted to mention that so you can pencil it into your calendars, and I hope to see all of you there. With that, Randy, I'm happy to pause and answer any questions that any of you might have. Questions, don't be shy, please. Yes, you can just speak up, Eileen.
Okay, one of my questions is, right now my grandchild is in remission, so to speak, but that does not mean that he doesn't have any symptoms such as being exhausted all the time, not being able to go in the sun. Most of what you are addressing, I think, has to do with those children who are actively have juvenile myositis, which it really is, they all have it. But what programs, or is there any research being done to help those who are in remission and sometimes jump back into active juvenile myositis?
Great question, Eileen. How old is your grandson?
16.
16. So there's two things I'll say, and I want to be a little cautious. I'm not a doctor, so this isn't medical advice. But I will rephrase a few things that I have learned over the years. Is that number one is the medical community in general is uncertain about the definition of remission. And you've just kind of hit the nail on the head, is that even though you may not see in the child's blood work that there's seemingly active disease, you can tell in a child's behavior that something is still underlying that is at work here. And that's one of the many aspects of juvenile myositis that's not well understood. What I would say that that might be helpful would be to look into, well, first of all, we have within about 6 months, we will have published a study from Dr. Brian Feldman at Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto on what I think will essentially be interpreted to be the beneficial impacts of exercise and supplements. So essentially, dietary supplements coupled with a standardized exercise routine may well help a child better cope with exhaustion and other, I don't really want to call them side effects, other effects, comorbidities almost of juvenile myositis. So where the field seems to be going is once a child is seemingly in remission, at that point, what do you do to continue to increase someone's physical health, their bodily health, if you will? And exercise is now known to have an important component of that, which is, as again, we all know, if a child is exhausted or is also feeling some pain, joint pain and other kinds of things relative to JM or some comorbidity, exercise can be a very difficult thing to actually do on a regular sort of basis. So physical therapy, exercise, nutrition, all things that the medical community at this point would say would be the next logical step to try to bring a child in or near remission to the healthiest possible state they could be in.
You mentioned physical therapy. I know that Jesse has a problem with his knee, but they have said no, he can't have any more physical therapy because he should be able to do everything himself. Well, it's not as easy, particularly if you live in the New York City area, to get some of these, to get physical therapy or whatever. That, I mean, it's too costly. So, I mean, I'm not saying that he takes a subway, he goes to school. I mean, it's not like, he's not doing things, but you can just see, I mean, he's exhausted a good deal of the time.
Yes. And so,
But it'll be interesting to see what kind of supplements they recommend.
Yes, yes. What institution is he seeing?
Columbia Presbyterian.
Columbia Presbyterian. Okay. If your insurance would provide it, or even if it wouldn't, it may be worthwhile to get, a second opinion, or perhaps you've already had a second opinion from Northwell, also in the New York area, or Montefiore in the New York area, on that very issue. Again, a different doctor's perspective.
I don't think it has even been brought up by my daughter. This was just something that, because of the grandparents thing, I'm looking into.
Got it.
So I have no idea what's happening, but it's something that, she might be able to go to her doctor and say, look, can you help me with physical therapy? And he'll probably say, sure.
Yeah, well, that would be a good place to start. And if for some reason she or you, don't feel like there's adequate progress there, I cannot stress enough the value of having a second opinion from another clinician who may just have a slightly different perspective on things.
I don't even know if she knows, if they know of any, because, don't forget when he was treated, he was 11, so it's 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, there was no other 5 years ago, right then. So now where are the other ones now in New York?
Well, two that come to mind are Northwell, which is, I think it's Cohen Children's Hospital on Long Island, and Montefiore, which is in the Bronx, in New York.
I know that hospital, unfortunately, right?
Yeah. And if you want, I can send you, my email is james.minow, MINOW, at curejm.org. I can send you the names of the clinicians at those two institutions that
Okay, great.
would probably be worthwhile in terms of just to get a second opinion. This is what we're seeing, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes,
Um,
please, Lori.
okay, our granddaughter just started kindergarten this week. And of course, in the back of our minds is COVID. And she's been vaccinated twice. She's had two vaccines. I wondered, how protected is she from COVID compared to a child that doesn't have myositis?
Well, we don't really know the answer to that.
Mhm.
I can give you some anecdotes that go back to when COVID was at its worst, when
Mhm.
everybody was most, nobody was going anywhere. When it,
I remember those days.
Yeah. And parents, rightfully so, and our doctors, rightfully so, were extremely concerned that children with who were immunocompromised could be disproportionately and significantly impacted by COVID.
Mhm.
And what we saw over the next 2 years was that really didn't seem to happen.
Okay.
Now why that didn't happen, in part, I think, was because everybody was super cautious, and particularly
Right.
parents of JM kids were super
Mhm.
cautious.
Right.
But what we saw when in the few cases where children themselves got COVID was that it was pretty much the same as if any child got COVID.
Okay.
So there didn't seem to be any disproportionate impact of that at all. Now, that said, and I wish I had these results now, but we don't. One of our clinicians, actually at Montefiore, is doing a study of children with JM and COVID. And so we actually will have some data here sometime in 2023. You know, it's data that will, you know, sort of give us a retrospective rather than a
Right.
prospective. But at least we'll have something to go on other than the sort of anecdotal. You know, Shannon Malloy, who I think all of you know on our staff, was, you know, was tracking this very closely, you know, throughout 2020 and 2021. And again, you know, sort of like anecdotally, the feedback was, we're okay.
Well, that's reassuring. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Debbie.
Hi. So I'm from Canada, and my granddaughter who has JDM lives in Toronto, and we are actually fortunate to have Dr. Feldman as our physician.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So really my question is, you were talking about expanding the clinical care teams and also the mental health training. And I'm just wondering if you're also looking at other children's hospitals in Canada, because I believe right now the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto is the only place where kids in Canada with JDM can really get specialized treatment.
Yes. There is another hospital, and there are two very excellent JDM doctors at that hospital, including one who was on our medical advisory board. His name is Adam Huber, and that's IWK.
Isaac Walton Kilton, I think it's out
Yes, yes, and they're in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
So they're you know, like they're far eastern edge of Canada. And there's probably another hospital that has some services over in Western Canada, but I'm not sure about.
So
that.
are you looking at trying to expand in Canada as well, the clinical care team?
If someone came forward in Canada, you know, that's a great question, and I should ask both, you know, Dr. Huber and Dr. Feldman, you know, both of whom are on our medical advisory board, you know, about that. I'm not aware of any others, but that doesn't mean there aren't others. So great question, and I'll follow up with them on it.
Okay, thanks. I have one more question. Sorry.
Oh, please.
Dr. Feldman's just switched my granddaughter from methotrexate to I can't even say it. Leflunomide.
Yes, yes.
Are you familiar? Like, is there what do you know about that drug and the research around it? Not that I'm questioning him, but I'm just curious.
Yes. The primary advantage to that, as I understand it, and again I have to be careful because I'm not a doctor, is fewer side effects. And if your granddaughter has improved to a level where methotrexate levels dosage can be fairly low, I assume he feels like this would be, you know, a less toxic and equally effective drug for him to make that switch.
Okay.
Is that CellCept, Jim?
Yes, that's CellCept.
Yeah, there are a lot of kids on CellCept for long time.
Oh, it's got another name.
Yeah, well,
CellCept, yes.
Yeah, CellCept is the brand, I think.
Yes, that's the
And
brand.
and the name you can't pronounce is the generic name.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I know our granddaughter was on CellCept for 4 years.
Okay.
And she was having liver toxicity with methotrexate. So after she had a flare, they moved her to CellCept.
Okay.
Also, I was trying to make another comment to Eileen, but I was on mute, so I was talking to myself. But back to exercise, I can say from experience with our granddaughter Bryn, she was started she was diagnosed in 2000 or at age 5, and she was started in swim lessons, and she thrived in the water because it takes away some of that. It gives her some buoyancy, so some of that muscle pain kind of goes away. And now as a 15-year-old and 2 years now, and her doctor also did not call it remission, called it no detectable signs of JM. They don't call it remission anymore. And she should be a sophomore in high school, and she swims on the varsity swim team. Never be an Olympian, but she competes well. And so I think finding something that the child can do is a big help. And I think, Eileen, as we've talked before, starting at 5 is a lot different than starting at 11. And I think it's much more challenging with the older kids that because they know a life of no disease, and us younger kids, they don't know any different at that stage. So
Funny, because I had just mentioned swimming to my daughter as an alternative. Jessie is not one to want to exercise. You know, she likes riding horses, you know, so that's another, but it's very hard to find a place to do some of these things when you live in Brooklyn.
correct.
Yes.
Correct. Hey,
Could you repeat the 2 medications that you said are in trials now? I can't, one started with an A and one a B.
Yes. Abatacept.
Would you spell that?
A-B, A-B, A-T, A-C-E-P-T, Abatacept.
you did good, Jim.
And baricitinib,
Uh-huh.
B-A-R-I-C-I-T-N-I-B.
Okay. And you're thinking that they're close to being available, or?
Well, they're available. They're both approved by the FDA for other conditions, typically rheumatoid arthritis kind of conditions.
Uh-huh.
But there's no strong evidence, strong published evidence that doctors could rely on that they would be, that they should be used or could be used in juvenile dermatomyositis. So when the studies, the clinical trial studies of these 2 drugs are published, which also has, information on, has all of the data and the dosing information as well, then doctors can begin to use these drugs off-label, similar to Cellcept. Cellcept is not approved for juvenile dermatomyositis, but over the years, as it has been tested by doctors and found to be useful, that it's now become, in a way, a mainline maintenance drug as kids start to taper down. Baricitinib and abatacept are less on the maintenance side and more on the initial treatment side for JM. Baricitinib, certainly. Abatacept, I'm not sure about that. We'll have to wait until we see the paper.
Well, she was diagnosed at 3 and supposedly been in remission twice. She's now 5, but now she's back, is active. And
Yes, yeah.
they're now telling her, looking at 5 years of, the IVs and the methotrexate and the steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're just really wanting something different to get her on, as far as, hopefully get her off steroids if they can. But
Yes. Well, the first paper to look at, which will be coming out of George Washington University, is the paper on abatacept, and you'll hear about it first thing from in our newsletter as soon as that paper is out.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And the other thing, Becky, is that I think all of us that have been on this journey for many, many years, there is no that I'm aware of, there is no quick fix. And kids progress as they progress. Every child's symptoms are a little bit different. And also I think depends on, you know, the doctors who see her may have slightly different opinions, but from what I understand, and I'm not a doctor either, but just based on our experience, is that there are mainline treatments that seem to work best for most kids, but they all can react a little differently. And unfortunately, I know Bryn was 3 years and was looking good, then was off medication for a year and then had a flare, and then it was another 4 years. So basically 7 years of pretty heavy drug treatment. And the only drug that I haven't heard mentioned too much that she was on the longest is Plaquenil. And I know I've heard from other parents and grandparents, some have been on it, some haven't. And I'm not recommending one way or the other, but it's certainly, it's one that's fairly very safe. I mean, it's an anti-malarial, so it's a bit of an immunosuppressant, but I know it was the last drug she was removed from. And Diana, if I'm misstating anything, let me know.
Is she on anything now, or?
No, she's been off all drugs for 2 years and she's
that's
doing
great.
very well, but when she's tired, she goes to bed. She never complains about it. But she has periodic muscle pains and gets tired more quickly than other kids. But all kids are different in how they deal with it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But there is hope.
Thank you.
It's a long journey, but there is definitely hope. Any other questions for Jim?
All right, well, thank you all. And Randy, back to you. I know there's a few other things you wanted to cover on the call.
Yep, I didn't know how much time you could allow, Jim, but thank you very much for the excellent presentation. And grandparents, by all means, if you think of other questions that come to mind, shoot them to us and we'll try to get the answers for you. Hey, Jim, thank you very much.
You are welcome. Before I go, I'm going to put my email here.
Thank you for sharing with us today, Jim.
My pleasure. And again, thanks to all of you for your commitment and engagement with Cure JM. And hope to see you. I'll happy to join you on another call in the future on another topic, and hope to see you at the family conference next year.
Well, we'll probably draft you again. Don't worry.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you all.